Let's go, tipsters. Here we go. First Dirty O podcast presented from the IDPtipster.com. But you know how this goes. I gotta let y'all get with that bumper and stuff. So, appreciate you guys. Here's your bumper. Let's go, tipsters. Okay, welcome. The IDPtipster.com presents the Dirty O podcast. You know what's up. Pretty excited about bringing this to you guys. You know, we at the IDPtipster.com cover individual defensive players, but our users are asking for different things. They're asking for a more in-depth look at different teams, and out of rave reviews, we've decided to bring that content to you guys. With that aspect, I'm going to bring to the Cleveland Browns, right? They're a solid football team. They're probably the most buzz around that football team than any other team in the league. Last year, with them drafting Baker Mayfield, them being on Hard Knocks, you expected, and saw a lot of flashes of what they're about. Baker Mayfield threw for 27 touchdowns last year. New rookie record set produced by Peyton Manning. That's what you want to see. If you're a Browns fan, that's what you're excited about. And they're trying to win now. They're spending the money. They're going after solid football players all over the place. I'm not just going to talk about offense on the Dirty O podcast. I will be talking about some IDP players as well and how I think they benefit from the offense, from the Dirty O and Cleveland's offense, which I expect to be one of the top offenses in the NFL this year. They got Todd Monken from Tampa Bay, and if you don't know, or which you might just be living under a rock, and you might think somebody else might have passed them, but Tampa Bay was the number one passing offense for yards last year. They kind of killed it. They had 5,350 yards passing, averaging 13 yards, per play. That's pretty bonkers. 334 yards passing per game, threw for 36 touchdowns. Their long of 75 yards for a touchdown. Now, Cleveland had a pretty decent year last year. Threw for just over 4,000 yards at 4,261, 12-yard average, so only difference of a yard. But they were, 14th total? Or, sorry, that's receiving. So, in receiving yards, they had 4,200 yards. Tampa Bay in receiving had 5,350 yards, right? Which kind of goes both ways, right? When you talk about passing, you a lot of trick plays and whatnot, goofing around. Cleveland drops, a couple hundred yards off, 4,007 yards passing, which they were 13th, they were 14th. Tampa Bay had 5,125 yards, at 8 yards per play, or 8 yards per attempt, 8.6 actually. They had 36 touchdown passes, right? They also had 26 interceptions, which if they could have, figured it out and not thrown as many interceptions, they would have thrown 40-some, touchdowns probably. But when you put yourself in a bad position and, a lot of turnovers inside the red zone, that really hurt Tampa Bay. Cleveland doesn't turn the ball over as much. Total of 14 interceptions by Baker Mayfield. He is their talent at the quarterback position, and he's a better quarterback than the two guys that were at Tampa, in my honest opinion. He's got a lot of swag about him, man. I mean, the dude is pretty savage. He's their leader, and that's what I see a lot out of that guy. I think that he's going to be the general of this offense, and they're loaded. They have everybody. They've got a great running back in Nick Chubb, who out of college, being a rookie, played really well at Georgia had a good year last year. Now currently owns the Cleveland Browns' longest rush from scrimmage last year. Broke a over 90-yard rush for a touchdown, and dude's got speed. He's got power. Can catch the ball out of the backfield. He had a great catch over a defender's head last year from Baker. Baker just knowing the offense and just getting into it. He started 13 games, played in 14. Came in from the Jets game, marched right down the field, had a real solid outing to win the ball game. Even caught a touchdown from Jarvis Landry in that game. I'm telling you, that team is explosive, and you're going to get exactly what you expect out of them, and that's a ton of offense. And with that aspect, you're going to get a ton of defense. Their defense is so strong, man. I mean, they've got Myles Garrett, Jannard Avery, Olivia Vernon, Sheldon Richardson, Kursky, who I think is going to be a really solid grab if you want to look at a fantasy linebacker that's really kind of a sleeper right now. Kursky, for some reason, is dropping. They lost Jamie Collins, which is a ton of snaps. Kursky's healthy. He's the leader of that defense. He's the one that calls the dogs, and you can even ask, Odell Beckham in an interview. They were trying to get him to call the dogs. He's like, man, I don't know. You have to ask my man Kursky because he's the leader. He's the captain of that defense, which is important, and he knows he's that guy. So he's going to be a great player to grab. You've got phenomenal young defensive backs, Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, who they just went and got. And these guys are going to be playing one of the top offenses in the NFL every single day in practice. That only makes your defense that much better. Because if you can hold them, you can hold everybody. Right? And Myles Garrett is a savage. Joe Schobert is a very solid veteran. Demarius Randall is a great safety. He gets no love, which is hilarious to me because dude shows up. When he's healthy, he's a top 10, top 15 safety all day long. If he's healthy, he's a top 10 guy. So, and that's saying something. So they're very strong on each facet of the defensive side of the football. And if it wasn't for their original starting quarterback last year, they probably would have made the playoffs. I believe they would have. I think they beat at least two of the teams that they played against. I think they beat the Saints early in the year. They went to overtime in that game because of a lucky long bomb, really. Great route by Callaway to get past the defense, and all you really have to do with Tyrod Taylor is launch it as far as you can. But that's the biggest thing with him. And Tyrod Taylor fell off like the face once Baker took the helm of that team. And you look at the offensive side and what his production might be, being Baker Mayfield. People haven't. I've seen many aspects of different groups on how they hold him. I have him throwing for 35 touchdown passes, and I get that not many teams had anybody throw 30 touchdowns except for Pat Mahomes, who threw 50. But I think it happens. I think he throws for close to 5,000 yards. I believe that. I think he's that type of talent. I mean, he's got 4 more games to play. If you count the playoffs, which I think they will make the playoffs, he passes that. I think he's that good. If in Todd Monken's offense, they threw for over 5,200 yards, why can't Baker do it? With a loaded receiving core, right? Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Antonio Callaway, and of course everybody knows Odell Beckham Jr., who, let's be real, was being underutilized with the Giants. I mean, he hasn't had a healthy season yet, and this dude goes off for 1,200 yards a year. He's good for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns this year. Mark my words. That's what's going to happen. And I'm not even saying he's going to break 100 receptions. I'm saying that with 90 receptions. That puts him as a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. And I think he's going to be there. I think you're going to see Jarvis Landry's biggest drop-off from where he was at, because he had a lot of drops last year. But I think that's him just getting to know Baker Mayfield. I think you're going to see Chubb carry the ball quite a bit, but I don't think he's going to carry the ball as much as people expect him to. But there were several games last year where Nick Chubb only carried the ball 4 times. I mean, are you kidding me? This kid's a workhorse. And I get he's learning a system, but Nick Chubb could be a top 10 running back. I think he's going to be a top 15 running back for sure. And right now, in most projected things, he's projected top 13, which is a great – he's going his 13th pick in the draft right now in most fantasy football leagues, which would be a great second-round pick for anybody, I believe. I think he's a first-round running back. So if he goes 13th, which means in most leagues are 12 teams, so I expect him to be picked up in the first pick in the second round. So if you're getting Odell Beckham Jr., Baker Mayfield, and Nick Chubb in your first 4 rounds, Jarvis Landry's dropping to 6. If you're getting Jarvis Landry in the 6th, 5th, and 6th and 7th rounds, which is where he's been dropping to, and he gets you 70 receptions, he's a steal. It's just the facts. That guy is going to be a steal at, the 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th round with 70 to 90 catches. And I can see the same thing out with Beckham. David Njoku, I don't think it's going to be as productive when it comes to receptions this year. I think he's going to have a lot of end zone targets, though. I think you can see just between those 3 guys, you're probably talking 30 touchdowns just between those 3 guys. So he's got 5 more touchdowns to throw to somebody, right? Which could be Antonio Callaway, which one of them could get a bump in one could lose some, here and there. But those are the guys that you expect to see. It's just astounding to me how this team was one of the worst teams in NFL history 2 years in a row. And now you see the Cleveland Browns making such an amazing leap. They were talking about playoffs last year. And if Tyrod Taylor wasn't a starter for the first 4 games, he would be. They would have went to and made it. It was down to the last 2 weeks of this season on if Baltimore had a chance to go to the playoffs or Pittsburgh was going to go. They would have beat Pittsburgh in overtime. They would have beat Oakland if they wouldn't have had a bad call on a 4th down that Nick Chubb clearly got over the 4th down line. They would have downed the ball there. If, their first loss with Tyrod Taylor, which they clearly should have won against Pittsburgh. I mean, you don't get 5 turnovers and lose the ball game. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. That's because your quarterback can't move the ball. Well, this one can. Baker Mayfield is a next-level quarterback, and everybody's like, oh, how are you so high on him? You were high on Peyton Manning, weren't you? Who had 27 touchdowns in his rookie year. Who threw just as many interceptions, right? And who didn't have nearly as strong as arm as Baker Mayfield. It's just the truth. The deep ball is better with Baker than it was with Peyton. And he has great intermediate passing. I think Baker's interceptions drop. I think he's under 10 interceptions this year. And I think he throws over 30 touchdowns. And I think he gets to 35 touchdowns. So if you're doing 35 and 10 with 4,500 yards passing, he's a QB1 all day long. Not even a blink of an eye. Not even a doubt in anybody's mind what he should be doing. With that type of offense, the only concern with them is their offensive line. And those guys have been gelling together. Baker Mayfield was sacked 25 times last year, some crazy number. a lot of that goes with not knowing the offense right away. I mean, there's plays where he held on the ball a few times, times where he just didn't want to make a bad decision, so he tucked it and dropped. That's just smart quarterback play. So I think that drops. I think the quarterback pressures are going to be there, but I don't think it's going to be 25 sacks. I think you can drop at least 10 sacks off of that. That makes it down to 15, which 15 sacks in the NFL, that's less than a sack a game, which is going to happen. But if they can protect them more and maybe get down 12, maybe just one bad game where you're going to see, 2 sacks, 3 sacks. But I think you can get rid of that. And I think that's why that they become so good, especially in Todd Monking's passing offense. There's a little bump in here and there, but they were great towards the end of the season last year. You had a QBR of 95, or passer rating of 95. I mean, the dude was crazy. And he was young. He still is young. And dude's got a cannon for an arm. They've got a great offense. That defense is going to excel. I'm telling you, this team has a tough schedule. They do. Do not get it twisted. But they could easily win that division because the Ravens have dropped off quite a bit. And if you don't think that the Steelers have dropped off just by losing Antonio Brown, you're crazy. James Conner's not going to have the year he had last year because they brought in a running back that's going to take carries from James Conner. So I'm telling you guys, big deal. Guys, we have some crazy, crazy news coming for you this weekend. We cannot wait to tell you. But I'm going to leave that with the guys and what we're going to discuss over the weekend. This is something I'm going to do every week before the season, Thursday night games, and I'll discuss the top 2 offenses and actually both teams, right? But because we're an IDP group, in general on Sundays, we're going to give you starting sits on whatever. I'm going to give you a little more information on Wednesdays just on the Thursday night games alone. And we'll dip onto the Sundays a little bit here and there too. But my key for you guys is to help you out on Thursday nights and what I can help you with that. We're pretty excited about the Dirty O podcast. I know I am. I hope you are. Big stuff coming. Like I said, we have some crazy news coming for you soon. And we're only getting better. We're only growing. And that's the key to happiness for you guys. And you know how we roll. Let's go.